What, you thought we were going straight to mutation? Sorry, but we have one other thing to cover from infection before we move on. See, each of the 4 games came with an OVA which finally gave the viewpoint of the .hack universe from the perspective of the real world. Dubbed .hack Liminality, the 4-episode OVA series corresponded to the events in each of the games, and the effect Morgana's rampancy left on reality. As the events directly accompany Kite and Black Rose's efforts in the world, it is always best to look at them in tandem with a related game, so as to keep the timeline straight. Each of the episodes are about a half hour each, with exception to the first one which is 45 in length, so by proxy these episodes will be short. And thus, let us start with the case of Mai Minase. I gotta say, I don't really care for Liminality's first theme, Edge. I can't really pin down the reason, but I think it has to do with the instrument they're using for the beat in the background. We open on Junichiro Tokuoka, a programmer for CCCorp, being thrown out of the company. The executive overseeing it declaring Jun's accusations will never hold water without evidence. Evidence the company has likely appropriated and destroyed. Once more proving my point that CCCorp is run by jackasses, and showing why I differentiate between the two CyberConnect companies. Our CyberConnect is Full Metal Awesome. We cut to the grave of Emma Wyland, with our old friend Harold Hurwick. Not sure why, he was missing for years before the current events. Speaking of current events, remember that article I pointed out last time? Yeah, it's Katsumi Tominari and his companion, Mai Minase, being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. Mai's friend Masaya is the one that found them unconscious and called for help, coming with them on the trip. Mai, for some reason, regains consciousness briefly, stating a single vowel, and there is a reason for it. An indeterminate time later, Mai is recovered, though Masaya worries that she hasn't yet returned to school. At home, she listens to violin music as she tries to forget a certain sound, and I'm leaving the violin stuff in as it's something of a plot point that ties back in. Mai has impeccable hearing, which she has tempered in her work with said violin. The following day, Mai does finally return to the regular grind, though classmates can't help but stare at her due to the incident she was in being made public. On her way, she happens to be stopped by June, who asks about said incident to no success. In class, we finally get a bit of exposition. Mai was apparently dating Katsumi, and the classmates bugging her about this prompt her to want to view the scene of the incident, where she meets June again.
Don't you want to know the reason why you and your friend collapsed? The world. Familiar with it?
Masaya, rightfully thinking a man in his 30s shouldn't be hanging around a high school campus, is indignant of his presence when he comes by, though June at least is nonchalant enough to give a good chunk of information about himself. Enough that these days you could steal an identity.
By the way, it isn't healthy to play games all the time, kid.
Tell that to those who get paid to do it. Masaya at this point tries to grill Mai for information, but all she remembers is the sound and a few nondescript aspects of their location, making Masaya think they were stuck in a root town when it happened. After class, Mai looks up information on June, surprising her that he was in fact a high-up member in CCCorp. And since CCCorp produces the game that caused this, she's naturally scared of what he was implying. As she returns home, Mai runs into a few of her fellow violinists, one of which being Masaya's sister Eri, who mentions her lack of showing up to practice to Masaya, with Masaya contacting Mai and telling her to stop worrying about June, as that scene we saw at the start was apparently 6 months back, and she should continue with the violin, something everyone around her seems to be insisting on. Getting a checkup from Masaya's father, who happens to be a doctor, Mai asks at the possibility of subliminal effects of the game being involved in her blackout and Kasumi's coma, which the doctor outright states is absurd, as no other cases come close to theirs. That he knows of. Mai goes to see Katsumi in the hospital and ends up being pulled into the room by June. He wanted to see Katsumi's condition, though the manner June acted in prompts Mai to be hostile towards him, despite his reassurances. Katsumi is actually the one who staggers the standoff as his heart rate spikes, inferring there's still some connection in there. The pair head to a cafe, where June gets Katsumi's login information from Mai, where it turns out Katsumi plays a character named Sieg, based off the character Siegfried, who wielded the swords Gram and Balmung in Norse mythology. Since Balmung the Idiot Player is an idol in the world, Katsumi's PC was intended as an homage, in hopes of getting that good. And if you were paying attention early on in Infection, you can also see Sieg is still around inside the game at that time, helping to work the cross-series continuity muscles and confirming for many of these events occurring alongside Infection's ongoing story. BBS posts later in Infection first informing us to the when of this incident's occurrence, which is not long before Kite and Black Rose themselves take on and fight Scathe. Though June isn't able to log in using Sieg's data, a problem he's run into before, with 6 other confirmed coma victims who happen to also play the world, all of which have not woken up and yet still appear to be locked as logged in. Now, some people would ask why Tsukasa doesn't raid in here, as Anha's woke up. Well, I'm guessing June's investigation didn't start until after Tsukasa's incident, as she was shown to be stuck in there for a while. The time script between the end of Sun and the beginning of Infection is indeterminate, and this occurs during the tail end of the first game's events. So it's certainly possible that it's been around 6 months since An woke up, thus no longer seeming relevant to investigate or even connected to this larger incident. Furthermore, we know the identity of the 6 coma victims. The first is Alberio, caused by Maha before Sign. Then there's Ryo Masaki when Sora got data drained. Orca's comatose state instigated the start of Infection, and a player called Alf went missing, his friends asking about him on the board and providing areas to search for our protagonist during Infection's events. The last 2, however, enter spoiler territory. Black Rose's brother Hirokazu was a casualty of the data bug at Hool Grands, thus why she was insistent when she and Kite first met about hitting that area, and why she's so eager now to remain part of Kite's investigation, or even started playing as she knew where he was when he felt comatose. And the last is June's daughter, Junka, providing his motivations in trying to uncover the evidence to force CCCorp to find a solution instead of covering it up. And June is focused on Mai so much as there's something special about her that allowed her to come out of the state before it was too late, allowing her to provide first-hand accounts of her experience. At least, if she could remember. Though a fragment of one does surface, being of a familiar girl in white among some stone structures, and the sound, which she finally identifies as one you can find in a tuning fork. Said note is called A and C Major within the franchise, but the note they're actually referring to, which is being hit, is more commonly known as Middle A or Concert A. A and C Major, though, just feels more alliterative. Talking with Masai again after this revelation, Masai admits he would be able to live with himself if Katsumi remained in his coma indefinitely, as he was the one that turned Katsumi onto the game. June calls Mai later, wanting to check out their club room for evidence and a direct login connection, which Masai tries to talk her out of as, come on, it is a suspicious old man. His reasoning, well, what normal people would think, is flawed in this case, and Mai apologizes for relying on him too heavily in this. Returning home, though, Mai has a run-in with her mother. She is irritated that Mai hasn't been attending her violin recitals, citing a belief that Mai needs to work hard to become a professional. Except Mai never said, nor wanted, to become a professional at it. I think this is a case of parent living through their kids, as Mai's mother gives an ultimatum of either setting her future career as a violinist in stone, or give it up entirely, as it being a hobby would be a worthless pursuit as, shouldn't she want her daughter to have a hobby? But this also shows how controlling and borderline abusive Mai's mom is, as the second Mai shows signs of thinking on her own, she tries to destroy Mai's violin off-screen to cement her point. Mai meets June at the school at night, June finally giving up when asked that this is all so he can save his daughter, which confirms Mai's belief that he's actually a good man, and wanting to insist in fixing this however she can. Using a loose wallboard, the pair sneak in and boot up the equipment, June using his company skills to create a backdoor into Sig's character, as it was locked in the place Katsumi last logged in by the incident. Mai logs in as well to explore the area again. Theta, chosen hopeless nothingness. You are probably wondering about the headset. Well, probably less so since the release of the PlayStation VR. Well, the headset was designed to interface with the game world, to make it seem a bit more real to the player. The headsets have inbuilt speakers, microphones, and monitors, so it almost completely replicates actions with the head, explaining how player expressions could be so well telegraphed to their characters. And while we have had stuff like the Virtual Boy before these devices were ever thought up, it's another of many examples of .hack predicting the future of gaming technology in 2002 as, Come on guys, this thing at its core is a lightweight and less cumbersome version of the Oculus Rift and PlayStation VR, and is highly believed to be the inspiration for those devices in their modern designs. Hell, knowing CyberConnect, they probably figured out how to make use of one so a user of the headset wouldn't become nauseous and risk an epileptic attack from use of one. Yeah, I got a PSVR in 2018 and had to return as that happened to me. The entranced state also explains why players can't escape by performing a hard reset to their computer instead of the alternative of becoming lost ones. By the point it begins, they're already too far gone unless what causes the effect is removed. The exception is of course here, as Mai wrecks the computer to stop it happening to June. He loses consciousness from the backlash of the sudden disconnect, but like Mai, will recover, with her dragging June out when Messiah, realizing she might try this, shows up and helps her, with June recovering soon after.
Are you ready to quit?
You quitting?
Nope, I'm not. We've only just begun.
Only begun.
The Liminality OVAs are a thankful addition to the first era of .hack, finally giving us a view of the real world in full instead of the small grainy snippets inside, or the lore builder news stories during the games. The first outing set the stage of what our real-life protagonists will be setting to do, uncover the source of what's happening from outside the game, and build a case against CCCorp for letting this continue to happen. June might come off as a creep, but he honestly does mean well and is just socially awkward. Have you ever played a game so perfect and entrancing, you appear to have an out-of-body experience? Well, that's sort of the best way to explain the effect here. When the cursed phases and other anomalies appear in the world, due to the headset, a subliminal effect entrances the players nearby to the point they're receiving more stimulus from their actions in the game than that from their own body. The connection is then made via the headset, and if the player is killed or data drained while in that state, the backlash causes a disconnect between the brain and the electrical signals that make up our consciousness, and said signals are then transmitted into the game, leaving the body comatose. Something that is becoming more and more common these days, and since the first era is set in 2009-2010, this is something else this game predicted. Mai herself comes off as a hard worker from how developed her talent with music seems to be, though isn't shown that much here due to her still recovering from her trauma. Still, she's clearly level-headed and keeping her options open, cherishing what represents good times with her now-deceased grandmother, who was the one who trained her in the violin, which is probably the sole reason why she even keeps at it, since everyone else seems to just shove that interest down her throat as something she should do with her life, even though it's not true that what you like can always be made a job. Messiah is the overprotective brother type, and dialogue in a flashback with Kasumi implies the three have been friends for years. It's possible Messiah also has feelings for Mai, though don't quote me on that. Though Kasumi, despite his comatose state and not being a protagonist for this, still serves as an inciting factor that leads to clues for and the formation of this group. From the flashbacks we see he's something of a goofball who's slightly immature, and I'm bringing this up now, as I might later forget. Once he recovers from the coma, the relationship with Mai won't last. Something that is somewhat relevant when he reappears down the line in GU. Still, his involvement with Mai will show itself to have been invaluable in hindsight. And we will be discussing, in turn, all the Liminality OVAs after we've beaten each respective game they first released with, so as to better match the timeline. As believe it or not, they are actually that important to resolving this entire conflict.